Hello, Julie here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be sharing a layout that I created for the cyber crop over at Mystical Scrapbooks for January. The theme for the month is a sketch, and I have created this sketch. This is the sketch I'll be using. To start, I'm going to use this Deco Foil transfer gel and a stencil from Cadence. It doesn't have a name, it only has a number. I think it's MU03. All of the products that I'm using will be linked in the description box below if you're interested in having a look at them. I'm going to use my palette knife to apply the transfer gel through the stencil onto my background, and for the background I'm using Core Colour cardstock in a colour called just orange or orange. I apply the gel over most of the background, leaving a bit in the middle where I know the photos are going to go. I do let it run off the edge as well. The photo I'm using is off of a calendar that my granddaughter gave me for Christmas in 2019. So the calendar ran for 2020, and I've cut the photos off of it, and this is one of them. I'm going to be using Colour Blast Arty Farty paper range for this layout, and this cardstock, which is another core colour card, and it's called Aquarium, matches really well with that colour range. So I'm cutting the blue cardstock so that it is just a fraction bigger than my photo. I use double-sided tape to attach my photo to the mat. I have chosen some papers from the paper range, and as I said, these are Colour Blast papers from the range called Arty Farty. The ones I've chosen are Courage, which is the one I've got in my hand there. The other one, Artist, Ideas and Possibilities, and Transform. So as I'm going through these, I'll tell you what ones they are and what size I'm cutting them to. So Courage, I cut that to 8.5 inches by 10.25 inches. This next paper is Artist, and I cut that so that it's 6 3/4 inches wide and 8.5 inches long. The next paper I cut is this blue, and it is called Ideas, and I cut that so that it's 11 inches by 2.5 inches. This next piece is from the paper called Possibilities, and I cut that so that it's 10.25 inches by 1 3/4 inches. If you want the measurements of the papers I've cut, they'll be on my blog, and I'll put a link to that in the description box. So now I've got all of my layers cut. When I actually created this sketch, I didn't have those two fishtail pennants in there to start off with, and that was an added addition later on. So this was originally what the sketch looked like. So that was my layers, and I've put them together and had a look at it and decided that I needed to have something to break the papers up a little bit. To do that, I decided to add a thin border of black to each of my coloured papers. So I cut my black cardstock so that it was 1/8 of an inch longer and 1/8 of an inch wider than my coloured pattern paper, which would give me a 1/16 of an inch border on each of my papers. Once again, I will put the measurements for the black on my blog, but if you wanted to have a go at it yourself without checking that out, you just need to increase the size of your pattern papers by 1/8 of an inch in each direction. I also decided to put a black frame around my whole page, so I used a 12 by 12 sheet. I cut the middle out of it, leaving a 1-inch frame, and then I used the piece I cut out of the middle to give my photo a black edge as well. I did that the same as the pattern paper, so it's just a 1/16 of an inch edge around each side. Now that my transfer gel is dry, and you can tell that it's ready to use because it goes from being white to being clear, I'm going to use this Fab Foil in gold to apply some gold over the top of the gel. I cut a piece of the foil so that it's a more easily handled size, and then I use my brayer. I lay the foil on top of the gel and then use my brayer to run over the top of the foil to make sure that I get a good transfer of the foil onto the gel. I have to admit that I really enjoy this process, and yes, I can see that I'll be using this technique a lot more in the future. Because I've decided to add that black frame around the layout, I need to trim my paper down now to 11.5 by 11.5. I'm going to use my Kaiser Craft black ink tube to ink around the edge of all of the pattern papers and also the orange background. I ink the edges on the pattern papers on most of my layouts because I like the way the black separates the different papers. It makes the paper stand out a little better, I think. I now go ahead and use double-sided tape or glue, whichever happens to suit the application, to attach all of my pattern papers to their black backgrounds. Time now to start assembling the layout. I started by attaching the smaller of the horizontal pieces on top of the larger one, and then I will start with the largest piece and work my way forward on the actual layout. So this was the first sketch, and all that remained now was to add my embellishments. I decided that I wanted something else in the vertical plane, so I cut 2 strips of paper. The orangey one, well, because I'd already stuck everything down, I couldn't cut a full strip, so I just cut a strip that was 2 inches wide and then marked it on my layout how long I wanted it so that it would tuck in behind the photo coming out from the top and also the bottom. I did that with 2 different papers. One of them I used the artist one that I'd already used in the background. That was the smaller fishtail. And the other paper that I used was Transform. And I hadn't used that one on the layout previously. So I cut my strips, then I measured how long I wanted them to be. I cut a fishtail in the end of each one, and then mounted them onto some black cardstock so that they fitted in with the rest of the layers, and then attached them to my layout behind the photo, or it looks like they're coming out from behind the photo. I used my T-ruler to make sure that I had them lined up. Unfortunately, I made a little boo-boo with the thinner of the fishtails. I've got the pink stripe on the right at the top and the pink stripe on the left down the bottom, but that's too late to do anything about that now unless I want to go and redo the whole strip, but I didn't think it would matter that much. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that I did emboss those fishtail pennants using a Sizzix embossing folder Because I throw the packaging away, I don't know the name of the folder. Time now to create my embellishments. On the sketch I've just put stars, but you can use anything for your embellishments. I'm going to use this Heartfelt Creations Dahlia Bouquet pre-cut set of stamps, and I'm going to stamp the biggest stamp twice. I'm going to stamp it using my Versamark embossing ink, then I'm going to sprinkle on some superfine detail embossing powder in black, and I'm going to heat emboss that to set that embossing powder. As I said, I'm going to do that twice. I'm going to use my Tim Holtz stamping platform because it's really hard to see what comes out and what doesn't come out with the Versamark ink, so I'm going to stamp it a couple of times to make sure I get a good impression. I'm going to stamp it onto some of the pattern paper. I thought that would save me colouring it later on, although the stamp is fairly heavily detailed, so you don't really see a lot of the coloured background at all. When I'd finished heat embossing my flowers, I used my scissors and fussy cut them. I'm going to add these yellow daisy type flowers, but to jazz them up a little bit, I'm going to use my glue, add the glue to the centre of the flowers, sort of smooth that out a bit with a fine brush. Then I'm going to sprinkle on top of that with some Dress My Craft frosted sugar powder to give the centre of the flowers a bit of sparkle. I'll do that for 3 of the flowers that I'll be using on the layout. The frosted sugar powder is great value because what you don't use goes back into the pot. Now I'm going to attach my heat embossed flowers to my layout. I'm going to attach the full one to the top of the photo, sort of so it overlaps the top left corner of the photo a little, and then I'm going to trim the other one down a bit before I put that onto the bottom left of the photo because I don't want it to overlap my daughter's face. Time now to add my other flowers. I'm going to use my hot glue gun to do this, and I'm just creating a little cluster at the top and the bottom. At the top I've got 2 of the daisy type flowers and a couple of smaller flowers in a greeny colour and a white, and down the bottom I've got 1 of the daisy flowers and 1 each of the green and white flowers. The title for the page is a Memory Maze laser cut chipboard that just says sweet, and it's got a heart and an arrow on it. To colour that I wanted it to be black, so I thought the simplest way would be just to use my texture permanent marker in black and colour over the top of it. I find that this works quite well, and you can do that with any colour that you like. One of the bonuses of using a permanent marker to do this is that you don't have to wait for it to dry, so now that I've coloured it I can go ahead and use my glue and attach it to my layout. So there we have my layout. Here is the sketch that I was using. This is from Mystical Scrapbooks for their cyber crop for January, and the theme is sketches. There will be another sketch as well, or 2 I think, 2 other sketches, so pop over, check it out. Don't forget there'll be links in the description box for the products that I've used, and thank you for joining me. If you're not already a subscriber, I would love it if you would subscribe and click that bell and then click all for notifications so that you are notified each time I upload a new video. Thank you.